The escalation is confirmed. According to many different sources, Russia might launch its massive offensive, which will most likely be the final one, as early as in only 8 days. And in order to achieve this, Putin is ready to lose up to 1 million of its own people. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And our first video is of Dmitry Prigozhin, who is reportedly returned to the combat activities zone, but most likely this time he started wearing armored pants, especially the ones which protect you from behind. Next we have a video of a leader of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is reporting right from the inside of a fighter jet. He basically said that right now he just finished bombing Bakhmut and now he is inviting the president of Zelensky to meet him in aerial duel. In case Zelensky wins, Ukraine can keep Bakhmut, but in case Prigozhin wins, then Russia will go all the way to Dnipro. And I mean, no comments here. But okay, because our next video is more serious, and this is the very first Leopard 2 tank in Canada, which is being loaded into the plane to be delivered to Ukraine. And shortly after, we have this picture of the same tank, which already landed in Poland. Next we have a picture of Ukrainians training to use the British tank Challenger 2, which is modification DTT, driver training tank. And then right here are the Czech engineers and mechanics repairing and modifying their T-72 tanks, which, guess what, will also be delivered to Ukraine. Recently Portugal also announced that they will be delivering their Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, and these deliveries are expected to be by the end of March. And ultimately, according to the commander of Ukrainian Air Forces Nikolai Vereshchuk, a group of Ukrainian soldiers already went abroad to train how to use the advanced air defense systems called ASMPT. So as you can see, right now more and more Western countries started pledging their military equipment to Ukraine. And the most important thing as of today is the timing of these deliveries. Because as mentioned previously, Russia is preparing its massive offensive, most likely within 2 weeks, and we will talk about this very soon. And one of the reasons for such rush is to do it before Ukraine starts receiving all the Western weapons, because Russians understand, as soon as Ukraine gets them, it is game over for Russia. And so, as long as Ukraine can withstand the initial assaults and hold their ground, the fate of this entire war can be determined within 1 maximum 2 months. And obviously, this time promises us to be full of events, hopefully good ones. And if you don't want to miss any of them as soon as they start happening, just please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and just see how I live outside of YouTube. Alright, and before I give you a quick update about the rapidly developing situation in the east and Bakhmut insanity, here's one quick news about the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Oleksii Reznikov. So recently, the talks about removing Oleksii Reznikov from his position as the Minister of Defense has been initiated. But it's not like that he is being fired, most likely he will just be transferred to become the Minister of Essential Industries. And in his replacement, the current head of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Kyrylo Budanov, is expected to become the next Minister of Defense of Ukraine. But most likely, such reshuffles within the Ukrainian government will not happen soon, probably until the next military meeting with its allies. Simply because Ukraine does not want to surprise its Western friends. Alright, and now as promised, let's briefly talk about the situation in the east. And first of all, we have a picture from Kaluga region located in Russia, which is located more than 400 kilometers away from the front lines, where allegedly a Ukrainian drone Strish has been intercepted. Next we go down to Belgorod, where somebody was smoking in the close proximity to the oil reservoirs. And reportedly, as a result of this fire and debris, another factory located close to the oil reservoirs has also been caught on fire, and what is so important is that this factory was producing the metallic constructions for the Crimean Bridge. Next we go across the border to Kharkiv, where unfortunately as a result of Russian attack, A baguette of university has been partially destroyed. Next we go to the east, to Novoselivske, and this settlement has been in between the two front lines for the last several months. And I don't know how the Russian forces see it, but this most certainly does not look like a settlement which is being liberated. And now let's refer to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which claims that Russians intensify their offensive to the west of Svatovo and also continue the pressure to the west-south of Kreminna. In addition to that, Russians are actively importing medical personnel to Luhansk region, which is just one of the confirmations about the upcoming massive offensive of Russians within the next 8 days. And we will talk about this in more details very soon. Heavy fighting has also been reported in Belohirivka, and according to Russians they already partially captured this settlement, but as you can see from this picture, Belohirivka still stands. But Russians unfortunately did make some progress to the north of Krasna Hora, and obviously the most intense fighting is happening around Bakhmut. At this very moment, Russians are attacking from 3 main sides, and one of the main goals is to capture this highway, which goes right into Bakhmut. And unfortunately, reportedly, this road is already within the fire control of Russians, which leaves fewer and fewer options for Ukrainians to retreat. But as for now, Ukrainians are still inside the city, and Bakhmut is still not yet taken. Moving more to the south, we have another picture from, how Russians would call it, liberated Marinka. But there are at least some good news, because according to the Ukrainian side, Ukrainians were able to destroy a Russian military base located in Kirillivka, which has been supplying significant reinforcements to Vuhledar. And before I give you the update and one major news from the south, let me briefly show you this map, which shows the changes in territorial control. And first of all, as you can see, Russians were able to advance to the west of Marinka. Moving to the north, to Vodyane, we can see that Russians advanced a little bit to the north, and the next day Ukrainians took back their land. Next we go to Bakhmut itself and its surrounding areas, and as you can see, the changes in the front lines in the last couple of days were pretty significant. And ultimately, judging by the number of these new red arrows, we can make the assumption that Russians increased their offensive in Liman and Kreminna front line. Last week I shared with you some of the intercepted Russian phone calls, and the feedback from you guys was just incredible. Because of this, I decided to dig deeper, and I was able to recover even more Russian conversations. And you can find all of them in addition to all the other uncensored footage on my Patreon, where there is still 1 week of free access. The link will be down below. Alright, and now let's briefly talk about the south. And first of all, according to the same report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians will most likely not be able to launch the new offensive against Zaporozhye city, because as previously confirmed, Russians were pretty unsuccessful at opening and maintaining the new front lines. And what I mean by that is that if you remember from one of my previous episodes, Russians tried to advance next to Orikhiv and Khulai Pole, and literally less than 1 week later the entire offensive has completely exhausted. Next we go to Novokakhovka, and as you can see from this picture, Ukrainians were able to destroy a building in a local yacht club, which Russians were using as their temporary military base. And then right here is the satellite image from Arabat Speed, dated all the way back to January 21st, but it has only been revealed recently. And what we can basically see here is yet another Russian military base, the warehouse with the equipment and also the helicopter landing pad. Something similar has been spotted just a couple of weeks ago closer to Melitopol, which allows me to assume that Russians will most likely launch their southern counteroffensive with the massive help with helicopters and maybe even fighter jets. And even though the Ukrainian air defense system is getting better and better pretty much every single week, it is still extremely crucial for Ukraine to also start receiving aerial military vehicles. In addition to that, we have more and more hidden and indirect evidence that Russia is planning to do another round of, most likely how they're gonna call it, partial mobilization. Because, I mean, it is pretty obvious that Russia will need more soldiers in case they decide to attack once again. And one of the first such evidence is that the Russian propaganda increased its narrative is that this war with Ukraine is pretty much a direct threat to the integrity of Russia. And one of such evidence is that the Russian propaganda recently increased its narrative that if Putin loses, the entire Russia will suffer. And this is supposedly increases the motivation among Russian men to enlist to the army. The second evidence is that Russia stopped issuing travel passports since February the 2nd. According to the responsible authorities, the reason for this is because Russia does not have enough microchips. And then according to the press secretary of Russia, Dmitry Peskov, he said that I don't see any problem with this. Why so much nervousness? Just use your internal passport instead and just travel inside of Russia. Why do you even need to go abroad, right? And well, the third and the most ridiculous evidence is that some of the families of recently mobilized people, they received 10 kilograms of vegetables from the government. And I mean, even by these means, the promotion of this mobilization is getting bigger and bigger. And can you guess why? Because then, according to several Ukrainian authorities, such as for example Oleksii Reznikov and Vadim Skibitsky, Russia is planning to mobilize up to 500,000 more soldiers. And this is in addition to 300,000 people previously mobilized. But I mean, let's be honest, the real number might have been much higher. And this, in addition to already estimated 132,160 Russian soldiers who have already been lost in Ukraine at the time of recording this video. All this means that Putin is ready to lose almost 1 million of its citizens in order to achieve his delusional and still pretty unclear goals. And this fatal mistake that he is about to make is expected to happen very soon, as early as in less than 10 days, according to the Ukrainian intelligence. According to them, considerable Russian forces are gathering in the east of Luhansk region and in the south of Donetsk. And one of the most probable direction of their initial attacks will be against Liman and Kreminna. Another possible breakthrough is expected around Vuhledar area, where Russians also bring their reinforcements, including from Rostov-on-Don, Mariupol, and also from Donetsk region. And this time, according to the Ukrainian intelligence, unfortunately Russians are looking way more prepared. This time they are not just going to send their troops in the frontal assaults, they'll be also primarily using special forces. Some other Ukrainian authorities, such as for example Oleksii Reznikov, he thinks that Russia might launch their offensive on the anniversary of the initial invasion, which is February 24th, while the others, such as Serhiy Haidai, the head of Luhansk region, think that Russians might start advancing after February 15th. Haidai also says that according to his intelligence, Russians bringing a lot of military vehicles and equipment into the forest of Luhansk region and they try to hide it, but well, looks like they failed to do this. And he also confirms that this time Russian soldiers will be much more prepared, referring to these more recent conscripts which actually went through at least 2-month course training. The very first batches of such conscripts have already started arriving to Luhansk and is estimated to take anywhere between 8 to 10 days to bring them all. But pretty much yes, as mentioned previously, all Ukraine needs to do is to withstand this initial assault, because then the Western weapons and vehicles will start arriving. It always gets worse before it gets better. And if Ukrainians will be able to hold their ground during this very active phase, the defeat of Putin is pretty much inevitable. And I'm not just talking about the military defeat, but also the defeat of his political career. Because this time his inner circle and most importantly the regular people of Russia will definitely no longer forgive him his mistakes. The next couple of months will be extremely crucial for this war, and just once again, if you don't want to miss any of this, just please subscribe to my channel, it only takes one click. And if you want to support my work financially, please consider becoming my channel member, use the PayPal link or become my Patreon, where there is still 1 week of free access. All the other useful links can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.